Welcome to the Savvy Dentist Podcast with Dr. Jesse Green, the show where great dentistry meets great business. Listen in each week as we bring you an inspiring person who will share their story, ideas and business techniques to help you create a practice and a life you love. And now introducing your host, Dr. Jesse Green.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Savvy Dentist Podcast. Jesse Green here at the control panels as always. And today I'm super excited to be having a conversation with Brent Tilson, who is the author of Go Slow to Grow Fast. Let me tell you straight up, if you haven't got a copy of this book, do not do anything until you get a copy of that book. It is an absolutely fantastic read. It's my book of the year. And I'm super excited because Brent is on the line with us today. Brent, how are you, my friend?
Jesse, I'm doing great, and I'm thrilled to be on this conversation with you today and talking with your audience, the dental practices who are listening.
Fantastic. Well, mate, firstly, congratulations on the book. It is a wonderful read. I mentioned to you off air that this book was gifted to me by one of my mentors, and I've since passed it on to many of my clients. I think it's a fantastic read. And firstly, congratulations on a wonderful piece of work. You must be really proud.
Well, thank you. It was certainly a labor of love, and it started in 2004 to give you how long it started.
It's a long gestation.
And so I finally decided to write it in about 2015. It took some effort, and then I finally took the time after a lot of people kept requesting, Brent, would you put all this down in writing because it's just great material, but we really would like to have it where we can replicate and use it.
Yeah. So when you decided in 2015 to write the book, what was it that really prompted it? Obviously, there's people asking, but what problems did you see recurring time and again? What were the things that you're observing in the marketplace that you thought, man, we just need to do this a better way?
It goes way, way back. So my background is when I was in high school, I always knew I wanted to be an entrepreneur. I wanted to grow a business. I didn't know what I wanted to exactly get into, but I was really good in accounting. And so I decided to pursue a degree in accounting, landed my first career with, back in the day, the big CPA firm of KPMG, Pete Marwick, which is a worldwide firm, and started off with them in audit and tax and worked with large corporations. But I had this entrepreneurial bug. I just didn't want to work for such large organizations. So a few years later, after a couple of changes, moved out, started my own CPA firm. And it didn't take long in the early 90s, actually, to realize that as I worked with all these small businesses, that they had each one of them had this sort of cyclical nature to their business that I was trying to figure out. Because I'm not only doing their accounting, I just wanted to understand entrepreneurially what made them do what they did. And I found out as I started working with them, and it was through actually a continuing ed seminar, that I was presented with this idea of the S-curve life cycle of businesses and how every business goes through a period of, on the two axes, it's actually grafted. On one axis is performance, the other one's over time, that companies go through a period that they're growing, then they hit a point where they regress and they drop, and it becomes kind of an S cycle. And as I started studying the cyclical nature, I realized that businesses that I was working with were all going through it. In fact, I got to the point in the late 90s where I'm drawing this. I'm asking the company as I'm sitting down, or the owner, plot for me on this curve where you are. How does it feel? And I was just trying to get this subjective idea from their head. Is it good or bad? Well, as times evolved, I created other tools, and I realized that there was a way to actually measure and understand where companies were in what I term the life cycle of a business. It's a lifeline. So this lifeline is it's their life cycle, but it's a lifeline. Think about your heart rate. Think about how you graph how you do as a person. Well, your business also has a rate. And so I called it the lifeline, and I then named the two zones, the driving zone and the drama zone.
Yeah.
Because I realized when you're going really well, it's great. But when things are tough, it's drama. And then all these tools came together, and this is in the early 2000s. And as I continued working with businesses, I use these tools as my personal assessment of each organization. And then by the time I got to 2015, I'd worked with hundreds and hundreds of companies. And it's like, okay, this is actually valid. I mean, I've worked with too many companies not to recognize this is a real issue. So that's what was the impetus. It was like, I'm watching it and doing it. It's like, how do I bring this to life and really help people see it and use it themselves?
Yeah. So you've spoken about the life cycle and the lifeline there, and you spoke about the driving zone and the drama zone. Could you just go into a little bit more detail about how do you know when you're in the driving zone, and how do you know when you're in the drama zone, and what might someone be experiencing so that the listener on this show can go, oh yeah, I'm actually in the driving zone, or no, I'm in the drama zone. What sort of things might they be experiencing? And I can see you chuckling. I can see you chuckling.
I'm chuckling because I love this question, because I love asking this of entrepreneurs, no matter what industry they're in. Yeah. So in the dental world, you ask them, because my wife, being a dental hygienist, I've lived this and all the stories over the years. So I have a personal connection with the industry. And the reason I'm chuckling is oftentimes I ask people and I have them plot, where are you, driving or drama? Well, the entrepreneur, owner, dentist, as you will, might look at themselves and go, we're killing it. We're in the driving zone. So they quickly tell me, oh, I'm in the driving zone. And then I go over to the front desk person who's checking people in, or maybe I ask the hygienist or the assistant, and they might say, oh my goodness, we're in the drama zone. It is crazy. I can't get things straight. People are backed up. Appointments are canceling. And they're over there going, no, we're in the drama zone. So when you ask that, it's because it's so subjective.
Yeah.
And so you have to look past the subjective. And that's what I tell people. It's like, okay, let's be real. What is it makes you feel like you're in the driving zone? And then oftentimes it's look at top line growth, look at new patients, look at cash flow coming in, not necessarily going out, but cash flow coming in, new sales. And everything feels really good. But then you have the other side of the house going, yeah, but we're having trouble with callbacks and people showing up. We're having trouble with these other issues and follow through. We're doing all the gimmicks. It's not working.
Yep.
No, we're in the drama zone. So it really comes down to, when you ask that question, I chuckle, because it's not so easy of just your gut reaction. Because your gut reaction is your just how you feel. You really don't have the objective data you need to know where you are.
Yeah. And in your book, you tell the story of Frank and Susan, right? And of course, Frank is the entrepreneur, and Susan is the integrator or the operations person in the business. And of course, they've got the different perspectives as well in the book. So what you're saying really resonates. And I know that there'll be people listening to this podcast going, exactly, we are totally killing it. We are all over this. But again, you've got to be able to go back and check the metrics and ask the questions and be more specific and objective about it. So what I wanted to ask you then is, if we've gone through the objective measurement of it, and you've worked with lots of businesses, I know, what are the common themes that you see, just in business generally, looking outside of dentistry for a moment, what are the common things that go wrong or headaches that crop up when you're in the drama zone? Is it team? Is it finance? Is it what's going on? Everything.
It happens all the time. And the first thing that pops up is you think about, what are those byproducts of things that aren't going right? And oftentimes, employee morale is the thing that kind of shows up.
Yeah.
It can be hidden in other areas, but there's just a level of frustration among the staff that just the water cooler chat, the frustrations, maybe a little bit of turnover, gossip, and that morale often is a byproduct. And actually not just, it is the product of a drama zone.
Yeah.
And the reason it's a product of the drama zone is it basically is telling you that organization is not running like it should be.
Yeah.
And the key to find a drama zone is you have to look past subjective and really look at the objective measurements. And you have to dig in. And what I find is you're going to start to find things like an increase in customer dissatisfaction. You're going to find maybe a decrease in referrals, especially in the dental industry, because it's such a referral-driven business. And how do you measure that? You're going to possibly decrease in retention of your customers, in this case, your patients. And are they coming back? Are they maybe not taking your advice to do the additional procedure that you're recommending, and they're questioning? There's something about the organizational structure that's not meeting their needs that is causing. So it's always the non-financial data that tells you how you're doing. Now, those are external factors, but the other are internal. Like, and one of my favorites that I talk about in the book, my favorite measurement is revenue per employee.
Yeah.
And I say that that's the number one measure of effectiveness. And people always say, well, why is that? Because I've never thought or heard about that. Well, to me, revenue per employee, it's the ultimate number because it measures are all the efforts of your team, especially in a profession such as dentistry, driving revenue per person at such a level that it's growing and expanding, or if it's shrinking, why is it shrinking? And it could be all these external factors. Maybe people aren't paying. Why are they not paying? Is it insurance? What is the cause of it? But there's these internal and external factors that people have to use to really determine where they are.
Yeah. And revenue per employee, I think when I read the book, I thought that just makes so much sense. When I read through the book, I went, man, he's really nailed it. And sometimes in dentistry, we'll look at revenue per employee. We'll also look at revenue per chair, variation of the same theme, all that sort of stuff. But I do think that that's a really important metric because you want to see that trending, obviously, in the right direction. And if it's trending in the wrong direction, clearly we've got some issues. So let's just say, Brent, that someone's listening to this podcast and they've gone, oh man, I think I'm in the drama zone and I want to get back out of that and move to the driving zone. I know that I've got to work on my revenue per employee. What are the steps that people might think about as they go through that life journey or the life cycle of the business, the lifeline? How do they turn the corner?
It's a journey. And in my book, I introduce a methodology, which I call the Quad 4 methodology or model. And in that, the model talks about how do you measure two items. One is revenue per employee, which is on one axis, and the other on the vertical axis is return on investment. Mm-hmm. And when I say return on investment, oftentimes people say, well, return on investment of what? Well, my argument and what's in the book is it's return on investment of the investment you make in your people. So in other words, total compensation. Mm-hmm. Because at the end of the day, as business leaders or owners, we could put our money to work in lots of ways. We could start a business, we can grow a business, or we could take and find that money and go invest it in some market or some other way to get a return on our investment. Mm-hmm. So if we're going to invest in people, how do we maximize that return on that? So these two axes, I believe, are very critical because they play against each other. Well, how does somebody go from the drama zone to the driving zone? Well, the first thing to do is they really need to assess their organization. Mm-hmm. And they first have to look at not necessarily the money they're spending on their employees, while that's important. What they really need to measure is how effective are they as a business.
Yeah.
And the effectiveness, and I talk about in the book, it's if I save money, I'm a CPA, and if I save money, I save $1, I make $1. But if I can, it's a 1-to-1. But if I can grow my effectiveness by 1% on the top line without changing any cost, I can drive 10% to the bottom line. Mm-hmm. So then the question becomes is what do I do to drive effectiveness? So then you have to start looking in your practice and saying, okay, how do I measure effectiveness in my group? Is it how many patients I can see a day? Is it how quickly does the cash turn? Is it how quickly can I bring new customers back in for multiple? And if I'm doing I try to remember, but if somebody's got bad enough teeth and you got to do all 4 quads, what does that look like? Yeah. All those pieces of revenue streams that come in. But what's the effectiveness that the group can go from being in the drama, but put things in place so that things are efficient, but very effective?
Yeah. Okay, I love that. Okay, ladies and gents, if you've just tuned in, I'm having a conversation today with Brent Tilson, the author of the wonderful book called Go Slow to Grow Fast, and I'm going to encourage you to just go back and re-listen to that last 30 or 40 seconds. Hit pause now, go back, re-listen to that a dozen times if you need to, because I promise you there's some absolute pearls of wisdom there that I'd really love you to write down and start thinking about. You also mention in your book the critical internal operations. You mentioned information technology, human resources, and accounting are the 3 drivers of scale. Now, before we get into those things, scaling is a topic that I talk a lot about on this show. It's a topic that I'm known for helping dentists to create scale. But oftentimes people confuse growth with scale. And obviously we're talking about go slow to grow fast. Can we just think about the difference between growth and scale for a moment? I'd love to hear your perspective on it. And if you could just speak to that for a moment, I'd be really grateful.
Well, growth is top line growth.
Yeah.
That's when you think about, and when people talk about, you're at a cocktail party and somebody asks how your company's doing, everyone everyone, but people quickly go to, oh, we had a great year. We grew by 15%, 20%. They talk about the top line so quickly, and because it's easy to talk about. But then if you challenge somebody, say, well, that's great that you grew so much, but what was the impact on your overall organization? Were you more profitable? How's your cash flow? How are people feeling?
Yeah.
Turnover increase? How about your customers? Are your customers happy, or are they all upset because you're not providing the quality of service that you should be providing because you're growing so fast? So growth is all about, maybe speed is a good way to think about it, but scaling is the physical ability to maintain the speed. And not to be burnt out and or burn everyone else out. So scaling is all about continually building infrastructure, and not just, it's investing in the organization so that the organization can grow and build and become stronger and able to support the weight of the growth. Oftentimes people outgrow, and I call it the growth ceiling in the book, but you go through this period, you grow so fast that you hit a ceiling of your company's ability to support it.
Yep.
And as soon as you hit that ceiling, you often don't know it till 6 months later. But all of a sudden, you're trying to figure out why things just aren't as good as they used to be.
Yeah.
And then you're in the drama zone. And then you're scrambling, trying to figure it out. So growth is about, like I said, speed. Scaling is about the strength of the organization to support the ongoing growth.
Yeah. I really love that differentiation. And ladies and gents, again, I'd really like you to go back and just have a listen to that, because one of the things that I've observed, having worked with lots of rapidly growing dental practices, is that unless there's the investment in the infrastructure, as Brent calls it, I call it assets, but same thing, different terminology, right? You've got to build that infrastructure and the asset base there. If you're looking to grow and continue to grow and you don't build those infrastructure pieces in place, my experience is you'll hit that ceiling, you'll probably go past the ceiling for a little while, and then your business will come back to what you can comfortably support. And so I've seen businesses grow beyond the ceiling, and then all of a sudden come back. Brent, have you seen that as well in businesses? They kind of go, boop, and then they come back.
Well, and what happens, it can be worse than that. So you have some companies that grow past their ceiling, and they're scaling so fast past it, or growing so fast, not scaling, but growing so fast past it, that not only do they get above the ability, but then it's not just that they go into a drama zone, it can also put them out of business.
Yeah.
Because they can grow so fast and get ahead of themselves that they don't have any of the assets or infrastructure in place. And then the recovery, they can't recover fast enough. Maybe they've run out of cash. Maybe they're whatever things they're deploying, maybe they've hired the wrong people because they're moving so fast. They're hiring. If you can walk in the door, they hire people. I'm working with a hospital surgery center right now. And this hospital surgery center is going through everything we're talking about. And as I'm talking to them about their staffing strategy, their comment to me was, Brent, we don't have a choice. We almost have to hire. If we have a surgery nurse that comes in the door, we just have to take them. If they're breathing and have a heartbeat, we hire them. It's like, oh, we can't do that. And it's like, well, they've not put the systems in place to really make sure they're vetting. So now they have turnover issues, they have morale issues, they have all kinds of stuff because they just feel like they have to hire everybody, but they're growing so fast, they don't know what to do. And that applies across every industry. So that's these issues that happen where people get ahead of themselves so far and they're spending money they don't have because they're trying to get ahead of the scale. And they're just throwing money at people. They're throwing money at everything they can throw it at, hoping to catch up, when in fact they're really haven't taken time to go slow, as my book says, to grow fast. They've just thrown money at it.
Yeah. So that's a really lovely segue about going slow. And before I'd come across your book, I used to use the expression better before bigger, which is, again, a variation of the same theme. So let's just say that there's someone listening to this particular podcast now and they go, Brent, I get that I need to go slow to grow fast, but I'm on this treadmill, man. I'm running. How do I step off the treadmill to catch my breath, to slow down so that I can then recover and go fast again? How do I do that? How do I make that time? How do I find that space?
It's a very difficult thing to do. I've lived that life in my day of having my own CPA firm. It's a linear equation. I only was able to feed my family with the hours I billed.
Yeah.
And if I wasn't billing, I wasn't making money. And then I grew my staff and got up to 6 or 7 employees. And I had another CPA working for me. And I lived it. And I was putting in 80 hours a week. I'm doing everything I can. And I'm marketing. I'm closing deals. I'm doing that all night long, doing proposals all day long. I'm working on accounting stuff. billing, trying to collect my bills, all that stuff that goes into it. So the question you ask is really important, especially for that entrepreneurial business, especially in the dental community and other professions such as this, because you can get so overwhelmed with the daily just grind of what has to get done. You got to take care of your customers or your patients, and you want to provide a quality of patient care that makes you unique and different, and that will allow you to compete in the marketplace. So you're trying to balance that, as well as how do you slow down and step outside of it and work on the business. So I recommend a few things. One thing is you have to be disciplined to take I take 3 days a year and go off site and just with my team, and we really think strategy. Then we break that down in the 4 to 4 major goals that we're going to work on. And then each quarter, we develop our quarterly plan. It's a 13-week race of the things we have to work on. It's all measured. And we tell the teams about it. And it sounds complicated, but it's really not. It can be very simple things you want to do to move the needle. And if you do just a little bit every day, that whole idea of 1% improvement can happen. It doesn't have to happen in big swatches. It can just be a little improvement every day from how do my employees talk to my customers? What are the 10 things they have to ask? How do they engage? What is appropriate small talk? What is the online access that we bring people back? But then I'm going to challenge everybody who's listening to do one thing. I want you to ask yourself how much you're worth per hour.
Yeah.
And really, really think about that. And I don't mean what do you bill per hour.
No.
This is a difference. What are you worth per hour?
Yep.
And I find that I challenge people, and I've come up with this idea of the $10,000 moment. Your goal should be that you have a $10,000 moment at least once a week. And the only way you get that $10,000 moment is when you have clarity of thought.
Yes.
And you're able to think about your business and your practice, and you think, what can I do in this one thought that'll generate $10,000 to the business? You do that once a week, and you're making significant thoughtful impact. So it's time away. It is making sure you're clear with your goals and objectives to your teams, but it's also taking the time to really, really be thoughtful, because I know I'm worth more than I can bill per hour.
Yeah.
And that to me is what I would challenge everybody to really ponder, not just passively think about it, but really think, what am I worth? And when I'm doing stuff that I shouldn't be doing, it's costing me and the organization that amount of money.
I love that. Ladies and gents, please take note of that. You've got to take time out. You've got to be able to give yourself that mental space to do the critical thinking, to put the mental work in, so that you can slow down to grow fast later. And I think that's really, really wise. I also really like the concept that Brent spoke about, is getting away from the business for a couple of days. Plan out your year, chunk it down to quarters or trimesters if you want to do it, whatever it is that makes sense for you. But then little steps every single day. And as Brent said, get your $10,000 moment. And that's really the key. One of the things that I'd really encourage people to listening to this show to think about is, how do I spend my time? What am I doing with my time as well? And one of the exercises I do personally is, what do I want to do more of? What do I want to do less of? And what do I want to stop doing altogether? And I can guarantee you that if you were to list everything that you do, there'll be some $30 an hour tasks that every single person's probably doing that they ought not to be. And if you get yourself busy with that stuff, you're never going to get that mental clarity. You're not going to have that $10,000 moment. So I just really want to echo Brent's comments there. I think it's really important.
I can give you a perfect example of this on myself. So in my profession and what I do every day, and much like everybody else, the volume of emails and activity that comes across my desk is consuming.
Oh, yeah.
And so 4 years ago, I hired a new assistant, and I made it very clear, you own my email.
Mm-hmm.
You own my calendar. You own everything. And your job is to leverage me. Because if all I do is sit and respond to emails all day, then I'm just doing nothing but reactionary to everybody else in the world's requests.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that was a lifesaver, because then what happened was the onslaught of stuff that comes in every day, for me, allowed me to be free to do what's highly valuable to me. So now how would that translate into a dental practice? Well, it would translate into a dentist looking and saying, okay, what are those things that maybe I need to bring in a younger professional to start doing and developing in my practice? How do I begin to provide high value service so I can leverage and scale my business? Because dentistry is much like accounting, that if you're doing it, then you're limited by only what you can do.
Yeah. Totally.
So the key in scale is to leverage other people, especially other professionals, so you get to a point where you're expanding that. So it's not just you. You can still drive the quality. You can still drive the reputation. You can still be the one who's bringing in the business that everybody talks about, but it's the idea of having that foundation behind you.
Yeah. I really, really love that. I think that's so important. I wanted to talk a little bit about coming back to some of the things we spoke about earlier. In your book, you talk about employee turnover and employee break-even. So we've kind of touched on that a little bit in terms of effectiveness. But can you just speak a little bit about employee turnover and how it impacts not just on the effectiveness of the organization, but just more broadly, what other things can be in place to eliminate or reduce employee turnover, mate? I know that's a big part of your thinking.
Well, it's a huge deal for businesses. And the reason it's such a big deal, it's such a waste of resources when we don't hire and develop correctly. And the reason being is, and I would challenge everybody listening to go pull out their financial statements from the last month or the last year. And most likely they're going to look, other than cost of supplies, they're going to look and go, labor is my largest expense.
Without a doubt.
And with labor seeing such a large part, but yet what I've learned from my years working with companies of all industries is that while labor is their largest expense, it's the least planned, it's the least organized, it's the least prepared, it's the most overregulated. And yet we don't spend the time that we should as leaders to recognize that we're paying these resources to walk in the door. I mean, we'll spend more time picking out a cell phone than we will hire an employee. And so it's like, okay, we need to really make sure that we're vetting people. So my advice is, let's recognize at the end of the day, they're delivering our services. And it's up to us, when they come in, it's up to us to make them better. And in many ways, they're going to come in pre-programmed in the dental industry specifically, because, there are a lot of people going through training, whether dental assistants or hygienists or other dentists that you're bringing in. But when you have the front office staff, et cetera, but at the end of the day, they've been trained, and this is what I find fascinating. They're trained in their profession. They're not necessarily trained in all the other things that they need to be aware of in running an organization and representing you and the patients. And what are your core values? So as you're hiring people, it's putting into place, like, what are the things you want to do from the interview guidelines? What is it you're looking for? Do they really meet what you want as your core value?
Yeah.
If your core value is being lighthearted and fun and all this, and hire somebody who's old and stodgy, then they're not going to necessarily be what you want. Yet, if you have somebody who's serious, or what I'm saying, as listeners, it's like really hire for core value. Use the tools to make sure that you're hiring from them. A lot of pre-screening tools out there. And then from there, you also have to know what are the skills that you really want to have from them. So it's pretty easy to say, okay, I want a dental hygienist to have these skills. They have to be conversationalists. They have to be able to engage with the patient. They need to make them feel good. They have to be kind and don't make them bleed and don't do all the other things. They'll never come back.
Yep.
Unless you're doing sedation, then that's a different story. So,
different story. Yeah. Do what you
different.
like.
But
you can do
whatever, that's part of the core values.
Yeah.
What is it you're applying to and what are you doing? So anyway, from there to actually having a complete set of thoughts from how do I find people? What is the training and development program? How do I motivate them? And motivation is not buying them bagels in the morning. It's what are the motivation things that we're doing besides giving food or having the vendors bringing in food to feed them? And then ultimately, it's retaining the really good ones.
Yeah.
And what I find, and what my experience with my wife in dental practices, boy, the really good ones, they'd be there 20 years plus. And boy, every patient loved them. They knew them by name. They came back. They talked about kids and grandkids. There's value in that.
Totally. There's absolute value in that. Massive value in that. So, mate, we've spoken that there's these three drivers of scale, and we've just spoken in depth about the human resource elements. We haven't really touched on accounting and information technology. I know accounting is your bread and butter and that upside down and inside out. And given your experience with dentists, do you see issues around numbers and being familiar with numbers or just not knowing them at all? What sort of things do you come across there?
I have experienced a lot of that. I have a number of good buddies that are dentists. And that's one of the things when I talk to them, they struggle with. They come out of school. There's certainly a lot of financing mechanisms for them to buy their equipment. They can get established fairly quickly. They can get themselves overextended, or maybe they buy a dental practice and they get off and running, but they've never really understood the cash flow nature of a business. They've not understood the timing of, I always talk about cash flow velocity. It's one of my favorite things to talk to people about is you have to understand, you have to have fast velocity or you will die without it. And so what are you doing in your practice to move the money as fast as you can? How do you ask for payment? How do you get the down payments when you have a large procedure? How do you not get hung out so that you're not getting the money in a timely manner? Because people will pay it. You just have to ask for it. Most people are afraid to ask.
Yep.
So when it comes to the financial accounting, I wouldn't call it the accounting because it is accounting and them reading financial statements and understanding, which is always challenging for everybody who doesn't like finances. But it's really understanding cash. It's understanding growth and understanding that growth eats cash flow in a hurry. So never read your financial statement and think you're going to be killing it because there's no cash left because you're growing so fast, but yet it's going out the door because you hired all these new people to help you grow, but yet you're bringing people in. So when I talk about the infrastructure of accounting being so critical, it's understanding the basics. It's finding, in many cases, how do you make sure, and I talk about it in the book, your business, your lifeline is based upon all the decisions you make in your business, including who do you pick as your accountant? Where do you locate your practice? Who do you do all the things you do with? You're setting yourself up for the future. And it's really important to find people you can surround yourself with that can talk to you in a language that you understand, that's not too big or too small. How do you find the right people to provide you that guidance? Because once again, there's a value in bringing people that can help you understand the things you don't know. And you really don't have the time to really dig in and understand it at that technical level. So getting really good counsel is important.
Yeah, amen. I think that is absolutely key and critical. Brent, we have covered a lot of territory today, and you've been very generous with your time, and I want to thank you because it is getting late in the night there in America. And firstly, thank you for sitting up late to come and talk to us.
My pleasure.
I wanted to just ask you, as we begin to wrap up our conversation, if you were to leave the audience with one or two thoughts about how to go slow to grow fast, things that we may not have covered or key points that you want to emphasize, if we were to have the gospel according to Brent, what sort of things would be part of that gospel?
Thank you for the question. And by the way, thank you for the opportunity to be on the show and hoping that the listeners get a nugget from this. And I always like to challenge people in that capacity in these kind of podcasts is there's a lot of things that we talk about, but there's a nugget in there for everybody.
Yeah.
And it's not the same nugget. So get the nugget you need to listen to and go back once again, listen to it again, as you said, because we've covered a lot of materials. But the gospel according to Brent is first starting off with the name of the book is Go Slow to Grow Fast. So the first thing is I always challenge people, what is your business plan? Mm-hmm. And some people, I have a plan. And then I look at it, it's like, no, that's a sketch pad. I really want to know, what is your real plan? Mm-hmm. What is your goal? What's a reasonable growth rate? If you think you're going to grow 30% a year, that's great, but you better have a very phenomenal growth plan and strategy and a business plan because 30% is going to push you hard. Mm-hmm. Now, in the first few years, maybe not, but you're hit a growth ceiling. So how do you sustain yourself? So the key is saying, what is my real business plan that's going to sustain this growth?
Yep.
What am I doing, quite candidly, as the leader of my practice? And I'm going to challenge everybody, what are you doing to read to lead? In other words, leaders are readers, is often what's said. And if you're not taking time to and read the books and the thoughts and listening to like your podcast here today and really searching for knowledge, then there's a huge gap because I like to call it mashing. And it's the idea that you take lots of multiple concepts from lots of areas and apply it to your life.
Yep.
So what can you read and learn you're going to mash into your organization? So you're planning, you're mashing, and then after that, you're developing. in developing the organization, who are the key players on my team that I really need to grow? How do I develop them? Who and how do I hire for the future? And sadly, what do I need to change out that's keeping me from going where I need to be? Because we all have friction and limiting things in our organizations. And if you have to be candid with yourself, what's that person or what are we doing that's limiting us? And you just have to make those tough choices. But all of those things together will make and provide the fuel for high growth and success.
Oh, that's wonderful. Mate, thank you so much. That is an absolute wonderful summary of everything to think about and to go through. Ladies and gents, if you want to find out more about Brent and the work that he does, I'm going to really encourage you to head across to his website, brentrtilson.com, and do yourself a favor, get a copy of the book. It's an absolutely fabulous read. As I said, it is my book of the year. I've recommended it to anyone who will listen. I'm feeling like the evangelical preacher talking about this book. This book really spoke to me, and I would really encourage everyone to just get a copy of it and really absorb it, and most importantly, apply it. Brent, thank you so much for your time this evening, mate. You've been a wonderful guest. You've been incredibly generous. It's no wonder that you're being lauded for your work, and I see your name up in lights in lots of places. So my heartfelt thanks and heartiest congratulations to you on a wonderful piece of work.
Well, Jesse, thank you so much. It's been wonderful to speak with you today. And I certainly hope that your audience finds a nugget that's going to help them scale and grow.
Thank you so much, mate.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Thank you for listening to the Savvy Dentist podcast with Dr. Jesse Green. For more free tools and resources, join the free Facebook group. Visit drjessegreen.com/Facebook. And for more episodes, visit drjessegreen.com/savvydentist.